Welcome to Beyond Your Wildest Imagination. This is a podcast about life after addiction, where people from the couch and valley sit down and share their powerful stories about getting sober, staying sober, and how good life can get. Today on the show, we have a bit of a different format. We have Kirby Freeman, a former guest, as well as Tony Lonsberry, who was also on the show. And we're sitting down in a men's group circle to talk about our feelings. And this is part one of a two-part series. So Tony and Kirby, welcome to the show.
All right. Welcome, gentlemen. You've all agreed to come together to have a very vulnerable conversation today. Before we get started, let's make space for a check-in. Tony, how are you feeling in this moment?
I feel good. I've been preparing for this ever since Brandon asked me to do it, and I'm feeling good and feeling calm and really excited to do this. And thanks for asking me back.
Thank you, Tony. In this moment, I'm feeling excited. There's some deep curiosity. I feel fairly peaceful. Just tapping a little bit deeper. There's some frustration that's been coming up for me. And I find that challenging because frustration can quickly turn to anger for me. And so that's there. And there's also some sadness and a sense of longing. And doing my best to find center and peace in it. I feel complete with that. Thank you. Brandon, how are you feeling?
The biggest word that comes up for me is nervous, for sure. This is a big undertaking, and I'm really excited that you guys are back here and that we get to put this show on and maybe help someone. So that's really important to me. And then that underneath that thread, if I go a little deeper myself, the feeling of that nervousness stems back to this underlying not good enough. And that for me it's always this lingering thing, not good enough, right? Which I think a lot of people can relate to. But for me, that's making sure we get this right, making sure, right? To appease probably someone that's not even living anymore. But that being said, nervousness and excitement are very closely linked, and I'm very excited as well. That's what's going on with me. I'm feeling really good about this and ready to move forward.
All right. As Brandon said, today we're here to talk about emotions. Something that in our society, men tend to not be allowed to have the full spectrum of emotions. So our first question today takes us back to when you were a boy. Tell us about a time you remember being shamed for having emotions as a young boy.
I guess I'll start since I've got the mic. A time when I was a young boy, when I was shamed, many times. And for me, my memory is a little bit shot, probably as a coping mechanism for the trauma that I endured as a young man and as a boy. And so I don't have specifics. I just know that any time that I wanted to fully express and be myself, it was met with criticism, mainly from my father or my older brother. Homophobic remarks, anytime I did anything that was perceived by them to not be manly, which essentially started to shut down pieces of myself at a very young age. And so not being allowed to be who you are at a young age and wanting to impress the one man in your life, your father or my older brother, somebody, right? And not being able to do that, I quickly learned that wasn't okay to be myself. And whether it was me just making a remark or saying something in a certain way or walking a certain way, whatever it was, my dad was fueled with alcohol. So he was making these comments, and obviously the more alcohol he had, the more belligerent the comments would get, and not realizing how badly they're affecting me. And so I was quickly learned to eat my feelings and not show any of them, because that was the safest way for me, right? Like if I could just walk past this guy, like I'd have to walk on eggshells. I come home and it's like, oh, he's passed out. Perfect. But if he's not, and I'm in conversation, now I'm already changing the way I speak, which is changing who I am and tiptoeing, making sure that here's a curated version of myself. You accept that? Perfect. That's who I'll be for today. And that just starts at such a young age, and it compounds over time. And that's the masking that we put on, the masking I put on. And from that, I think, I don't even know at what age that started for me, but it's translated to having to peel back those layers of onions as an adult. So it was really challenging for me being a child and having been told that my emotions and who I am it's not okay. And so, yeah, maybe one day the memories will come back to me for myself. Some people don't want them. I do. The coping mechanism can go away for now. I'd like to feel all that so I can move forward. But that's what's coming through for me. Yeah. Do you feel like sharing, Kirby?
Thank you, Brandon. Just take a breath here. I relate to a lot of your story with the memory gaps and a lot of it. Thank you for going there, bro. In me, the first one that I can remember was elementary school. And it wasn't from my mother and father, where in a really subtle way, I feel it was from my dad, who would laugh at challenging expressions and jokingly tell me that they weren't okay. But it was all in a joking sense, right? So it wasn't, my mind didn't feel like it was really abrasive, but looking back at it now, it's like, holy smokes, that really is a subtle way of testing the water to see what they can get away with, right? And I recognize that pattern in myself. But the one that I feel called to share here is in elementary school, where it was like late spring in the Calgary area. And I really enjoyed hanging out with boys and girls. And like, I was very open to sharing connection with different people. And this was I believe it was grade 2 or grade 3. I don't remember the specific year, but it was spring, and I loved to pick flowers and give them to girls, right? So I was super stoked to do that and to share that, right? It's like, yeah, I get to show up and they love it, right? And it felt really good in me. So I went and I picked a bunch, and then I started handing them out. And I got back to the classroom, and the male teacher came to me and said, men don't give women flowers unless they're trying to explicit sentence them. So that really, really just pushed me down, and I felt really trapped and unable to express myself in the way that felt really good for me and the other people that were around me, right? So yeah, it was a challenging one for me to feel, and I stopped doing it. Like from that day until I was 31 years old, I didn't buy women flowers, period. I wouldn't buy myself flowers. I wouldn't pick them. And I love them. Like, it's a part of me. They're so beautiful and amazing to witness, to smell, and all the things. So I feel like I lost a part of myself that day. And now I'm regaining it. And it feels so amazing to be able to give my partner flowers. She loves it. And yeah, it's vulnerable to share because I haven't gone to that place for quite some time. So thank you for the question. And I feel complete with that. Tony, do you feel called to answer?
Yeah, I'm thinking back, so many times that I wasn't ashamed, but for me, one that comes to mind is me and my sister were in a store, and we ended up just grabbing, I forget what it was, a little Kool-Aid pack or something, and the guy who owned the store called the cops, and like I shared in my podcast, my parents were into a lot of criminal elements and stuff, and I just remember all the fear that I had that I got caught and I was going to be brought home. And I knew the stealing wasn't an issue because that was okay in our home. It was the bringing the cops home because we were getting brought home by the police, and I knew what that was going to bring. And and then when we got brought home, and sure enough, we got ridiculed, and that we got caught for one. That if we're going to steal, not to get caught was what we were taught, and because my parents were thieves, so that was kind of what we learned. And I remember taking a real bad beating for it, and it was. And I still remember that to this day, how I felt as soon as I got caught. That it was that the cops, that was the biggest thing, was the OCMP were going to bring us home. They're going to find out where we lived. And because my father was taken to jail a lot, so I thinking, well, now I'm going to get him taken away. We're going to lose him again, and all the stuff that went with that. So, yeah, it was, I always remembered that, about that. And of course, when I got home, it did happen, right? As soon as the cops left, it was just chaos. And me and my sister took a really bad beating for it. And then from then on, I taught myself, like, if I'm going to steal, not to get caught. So I tried to really emphasize that in my life. And, those are just some of the values I was taught as a child. And yeah, it was hard. It was really hard, So I think about that lots that time. Just to think as a small child, I think I was 5 years old when this was going on, and to be taught that stuff it's just not right? So, yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen. Now, getting more general, we're curious about what are the things that you heard often as a boy growing up that made it clear that your emotions were supposed to be pushed down and shut off? What emotions weren't allowed?
Thank you for the question. Right away, the part where what feelings was I not allowed to feel came through quite strong for me. And it was pretty much any heavy feeling that wasn't joy and fun, right? So if I was sad, it wasn't okay. If I was angry, it definitely wasn't okay. Anger was probably the worst one to express. Tears, only men who aren't men cry, is what I was told, and what I heard, and what I felt to be true for the longest time. And it brings me sadness in this moment to feel that, because tears are healing, right? It's necessary for people to cry because it heals the individual, and also all people that are in the presence of that person emoting in that way. So it really, for me, again, it just it cut it right there. And it's like, okay, now I cannot do this. I cannot express this way, and I cannot be sovereign in who I am and what I'm doing. And this came from predominantly authoritative figures, school teachers, principals, people who I perhaps pedestalized in a way, and I put them in positions of power. I gave them my power because I felt like they had that authority over me. And I see that that's not the path, right? It's yes to have some trust, but that has to be earned. And also finding a path to autonomy. So yeah, those are the challenging feelings that I wasn't allowed to feel. Again, I'm feeling the narrative of not being okay to show affection towards women unless I'm wanting or feeling like I'm going to get something from them, right? So my soul wants to express openly and freely and give gifts and show up authentically. But the conditioning that I've been through showed me that it wasn't okay to nurture and to hold and to caretake to some degree in a good way. So yeah, and that was again from authoritative figures that I received most of that. I feel complete with that part of my share. Tony, I'd love to pass it to you. What comes up for you?
Thanks, Kirby. Yeah, I was, feelings. I experienced lots of fear as a child. Everything in our home was traumatic. It was, there was lots going on. Lots of criminal people in and out, and lots of chaos. It was all, my parents were actively in addiction the whole time and alcoholism, and so I watched them and what they did, and everything was dictated by what they were using at the time. And I couldn't express any of my feelings because to be vulnerable would prove that I was weak, right? And they were everybody was so ego filled and gangster type of people, and so I looked up to all that, right? And I didn't see any feelings from them unless it was either being really angry because they didn't have what they needed, or really happy because they had too much of what they needed. So for me, I just I sat in the background. I watched all this growing up, and my feelings came out, and I became an introvert. I just backed into a corner and became distant and kind of watched everything that was going on. But I remember always being afraid, and anytime I try to talk to somebody about my fear, it was a sign of a weakness, right? That, why are you scared? And then there would be no conversation about it. There was never any, are you okay? Or that kind of, love I needed from them, right? I was always pushed to the side. So what I learned to do is I found in outwardly stuff. I would, I watched them, how they got emotions, and I did the same thing, right? So at a very young age, I found a substance around the house, and I would take it, and that would dictate my emotions, right? So if I needed to be calm, I would find something that got me calm. If I needed to be happy, I would find that, and it was all fake. I never, I don't think I experienced an honest emotion until my first time through recovery. It was always dictated by what I was doing, the substance I had, or the situation I was in, and my friend group, I didn't really have a friend group. I was very alone as a child, and, I was using all kinds of different substances at a very young age. So, I would go around people that I could get stuff from, but per se to have any friends. Yeah, and I never did go to high school. Like, I never made it there because it was such a wreck when I was in a public setting that I couldn't actually get into school and focus and make it through a day without interruptions. And so I never did do very well in school. And I remember that too, like feeling like I was just such a loser because I never learned to read. That was one thing. And the academic part I didn't take because I was so disruptive. I never got to sit in the classroom very long. And so I always felt less than really, excuse me, around everybody. I didn't know where I fit in. I didn't know how to express myself. And and then when people that around me would take me in and show me a bit of care, like a counselor or, a social worker or something, couldn't be myself. I needed to be someone really guarded and not talk about what was going on in my home because I was fear of being taken away or my parents, finding out what I was saying. So I couldn't be open about anything. And when I did, there was repercussions from the home, right? So, I was really, really guarded in what I said. And that just, it transpired through my life that way. I always kept it really deep inside and never really let out the emotions. and always feeling alone, right? Because I couldn't talk to nobody. I was always alone, no matter where I was or who I was with. And it was a hard way to grow up, and I didn't understand who I was. I never could express or feel any of that stuff. So, and I would dictate who I was in every different situation, and and I never experienced vulnerability or even honesty. Like, everything in my home was about lying, cheating, and stealing. So to be honest was not a value, right? And that was a big thing, because I would go to like school and stuff, and they teach you about honesty and you can't be lying. And I thought that was totally crazy. Like, I had to do that just to, and to hide how my life was at home. So, I learned that young, and it was sad. I was alone, very lonely, and thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. For me, I think almost every emotion was shut down due to my fear of even speaking my mind. And so joy, being happy, was, if I was being joyful in a way that was my dad would make fun of. So then I was like, okay, joy's not okay with him. I got angry, he got angrier, and now he's abusive. So anger's gone. I got sad, you're a wimp. Okay, sadness is gone. They slowly just gone. Every emotion getting eaten up inside. And I was a sensitive child growing up, and I'm a sensitive man now. And I believe we all have some sensitivity in us. But through that expression of myself at such a young age, which now I look at myself being sensitive as a trait that I love. I love that now. And for me to have had it as a child, that would have been beautiful. But instead it was repressed, pushed down. And so this sensitive boy who had things to say and things to feel and a nurture, like a heart to open up, and that heart got closed at such a young age, like that rips me apart to think about that little boy. Like, man, like, yeah. And that's been an unfolding as an adult now to, like, it's okay. You're allowed to feel. And throughout, like, I look back as when I was a child, right? I had all this sensitivity and all these feelings that I was shutting down. But when I was really young, like I was vibrant. I know I can feel that in my being right now. I know who I was when I was that young. And slowly as it got shut down, and then I'd come into school and you meet all these other boys that I'm friends with, and they might have had a similar story where now, to your point, Kirby, like, it's not okay if you were to try to say anything to a girl that's nice. Well, now you're made fun of for that. And anything that you say that isn't manly is now homophobic. Like, that was pretty prevalent in the Cowichan Valley with my friends, like derogatory terms getting thrown around, and you didn't want to be the butt of a joke. So you ate those feelings. And that continues as you grow older. And so no emotion shown except for pretending everything's good and everything's okay, and just like trying to keep the peace. And essentially for me, that's one of my traits I've had to overcome, is now trying to appease everybody and make sure that what I'm doing is okay with them. Right? That's a tough place to be in, especially as a young boy. Like, you're tailoring everything you say and do. And that takes up so much energy. And I remember this one story that my friend's mother at the time, I think it was for grad or something like that, where she wrote a card for everyone with their name on it. And so Brandon for me. And when it got to the O, it was like an acronym, right? So she wrote opaque. And I had to look that word up. And I was like, why is she calling me opaque? Like, it was supposed to be all these things that pertain to my traits. And then I was like, opaque? She's like, yeah, because we don't really know what you're feeling. And I thought, well, I know what I'm feeling. Like, that was news to me. I was like, you don't know what and I guess it was because I'd been pushing things down for so long, and I was really depressed, and I would pick at it and pick a little bit to let people know, like, I am depressed, but then I would say no. So like they knew something was going on, but I never fully wanted anybody to know exactly how I was feeling. It was this weird roller coaster of mixed emotions where on the outside, everything looked good, but on the inside, I was crying for help, but I didn't know how to cry for help because crying for help meant that you would get hurt somehow, verbally, physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So that has been my learning and my path to try to figure that stuff out. But yeah, as a young boy, to answer the question, those pretty much every emotion got stuffed down for me. Pretty much everything. Yeah. And the biggest emotion, love. Love was not okay. Showing love is weakness. Wow, really? Really? And now I know love is everything. So if we could just teach our children to allow to fully express themselves, anger, sadness, joy, fear, love, what a world we'd live in then. That would be beautiful. Yeah. I feel good on that.
I'm curious if anyone has any further reflections or shares, because as you all reflected, you obviously all still had emotions, and you all coped with the realities you were living in, that for your own individual reasons, these emotions weren't safe to express, and you coped with that in different ways, and it had different impacts on you, and I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
Thank you for the question. A lot of what I heard in your share, Brandon, was around nice guy syndrome. We've heard of this term. It's like people walking around trying to seek validation from other people. Right? And for me, that was the seed, that was the root of it that started me down to I am not okay and I am not enough. And I need somebody else to regulate me, right? So I was seeking externally that depth of regulation. And I learned this from family and friends and my upbringing, that playing with jokes to see if you can get your needs met is the way. Right? Which very quickly turned into lying for me. And a challenging path for me in it, because I was not being my authentic self at all. I was so far away from it. And there's sadness there. It's like my soul's longing is to be here autonomously and to be free. Free to express. And the paradox of freedom and structure, I think that it's quite an interesting one, but I won't go into that. But yeah, I think, the longing was to be free and the longing was to express fully, completely, and that was not there. So that started with me doing things to try to feel better and seek validation from other people initially, and from other people coping with that strategy wasn't necessarily working. So I chose to find it in what I perceived that other people were finding joy and euphoria in, right? So drugs, alcohol, objectifying women, things that like makes my stomach turn to think that I showed up that way now. And I see so many doing it, and it brings sadness to me and anger, actually. Yeah. And I do feel, to your point again there, Brandon, of the importance of expressing emotions. A part that I want to add to that is, yes, it's important for little people to express everything and all people to express what they're feeling. And a really important part to that for me and the people that I surround myself with is to do it in a way that honors the self and people around you, right? Because if we're expressing the emotion by abusing or by doing something of that nature, we're actually projecting it onto whoever's there. Because the most potent way to integrate something is to be taught, right? And that's a potent teaching. Showing somebody repeatedly that abuse is okay creates abusers, right? So yeah, I feel that's complete for now with that share. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Kirby. I totally agree with that. I think expression for children is like, you don't need another person to express your emotion. And so like that anger can be expressed on a mat in a bedroom. But I really like that you added that point, because that is important, that we make sure that we don't project those emotions on to someone else. I also can relate with what you said, Kirby, about laughter. And so like that was the common ground between me and my father, making a joke. So I could make my dad laugh. That was it. I'd stick around, right? And so I knew that, wow, I've made my dad smile and laugh. He doesn't do that often, and I can do that. So that was a little power that I figured out. But in doing so, I used the same crass jokes. They were derogatory to women and homophobic jokes and all of these racial slurs when he claimed not to be racist. But, you know, that commonality, and maybe he wasn't, but he certainly used them, which for me is still an unlearning. And so I pushed myself down, and then I started to be like, I'm not allowed to be myself. And I started going, well, who am I? Oh, I'm the guy that makes these jokes with my dad because that makes him laugh. So now I've taken myself and I've buried him. And now I've put someone else in its place. And this guy's still down there. He's buried, and he wants love and affection and joy and wants to be heard. But instead, I'm just going to be this guy because that's the safest. And it that progressed into school, where it's like, you know, laughter works. All your friends. It doesn't matter what's said. If there's an emotion that comes up that I need to feel, I don't have to. I can make a joke about it. They all laugh. It's over. And that feeds into my adulthood as well. And it's something that, yes, laughter is great and joking around is great, but there has to be, you have to do it from a place of love and not a place of fear to feel my own feelings and what's actually under the surface. And so for me, yeah, laughter was that bond for me and my father. And it's not an emotion, I guess, per se, in my understanding of it, but that was one that was accepted and okay for me. Whereas anything else was too hard to deal with for the people that were in my life that were taking care of me. And so like my mother, I do want to reflect on this one piece. I used to beg my mother to leave my father. Let's go, please. Why are we here? We have no money. Where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And so that was an expression. I was mad. I was angry. And scared. So scared. Why? Why are we going through this again? He's beating you. He's beating us. He's scaring us. This is terrifying. And I want to go, Mom. And we wouldn't. And so that was another learning for me, that what I truly need, my need will not be met. My deepest fearful need will not be met. It's not okay. Okay. So just grin and bear it, suck it up. What's happening here is okay. That's the message. What's happening here, we must endure. We must. Very heavy. And so I endured. We endured for many years. And I made it. And now I know how to endure. So maybe there is a silver lining. I can get through a lot of stuff. And that's an important lesson for myself. And my mother, she is a beautiful woman, and she was enduring. I need to make sure I say that, because she was just doing what she had to do to protect us. And that was the best thing she knew for us. But feeling that as a young kid, when it's like, it's very easy. If we leave, we don't feel this anymore. For me, that was black and white. As a child, you don't know all the other baggage and all the other stuff that comes with it, right? Money is real. You do need it. Where would we go? So it was really hard as a child, and it kind of broke my trust in my mom for me. I mean, like, not overtly where I actually felt that towards her, but looking back now, like, that was probably, it didn't just happen once. It was, I mean, me and my sister would say the same thing. Like, we gotta go. And yeah, it wouldn't happen. And so you keep trying and thinking things are going to change, and they don't. And at some point you just stop trying, and another piece of you gets buried. And so those emotions, again, like at every turn growing up, I would try to express myself, because it would come out explosively. I'd be opaque and hidden and buried and depressed and holding it here. And then I would be like, here's my shot. And then it would get rejected, or what I perceived as rejection. And I would bury it even deeper. And that is a really tough process for me to go through. And it put me into this depressive shell where I had this persona, and I just had to bury that and move on with life and endure. And so I made the best of it, but it wasn't easy. But I think that's it for that question for me.
Yeah, and just, there's a lot. This is a pretty heavy question, and just thinking of, like, growing up and with that kind of, not to have any emotion, and, I was the person that was supposed to be strong, and my dad ended up passing away when I was, I think, 10 years old, and after that I had to take care of my mother, right? So, I was now a provider. I had to look after the home. My mom was, all she did was consume drugs and then stuff, so she wasn't able to function and stuff, and I remember I was always crying out to get taken away from her, because it was so much going on. I was so scared all the time, and I couldn't tell anybody what was going on, because she would beg me not to, and because then she would lose me, right? And I was taking care of her at this point, like all of her needs. And I remember just always being so ashamed of what was going on in my home and not being able to talk about it, and until I would get to a point where I'd turn suicidal. And I'm thinking about now, like, I wasn't suicidal. I was just crying out for somebody to come and talk to me, to figure out what was going on with me, because I was just terrified. And, and then that progressed through the years. I looked after my mom for a long time, and, and I thought I would see other people in my situations somewhat get taken away and go to social services and stuff. And I always thought to myself, like, why not me? So that created abandonment, right, big time in me from the system, from people, authority figures. And, and like I said, my mom was really, really abusive to me in lots of different ways, not physically, but really emotionally abusive. And if I didn't fulfill her need, she would belittle me and call me all kinds of names, and there was lots of violence going on. And I just remember the fear, constant fear, not being able to express that with her, for one, because I had to be strong. And then growing up and becoming a teenager, I was kind of like, I took on the bad guy thing and showed no emotion, because if I showed emotion, I was weak. So then that just progressed through my life and my relationships, and I never knew what love was. When Brandon said that about like having a tough love, I never experienced any love. Like there was nothing. In my childhood or growing up in my teenage life until I got a little bit older, that I never even heard about love. Like it was such a foreign thing to me. And when I think about it now, if the love that they put into all the stuff they had, the substances and stuff like that, I just wanted that so bad, to be loved like they loved the lifestyle and the way they were living and stuff. And it was, and I do that for myself now, right? I think of all those negative things that I put all my energy into and stuff, and I turn it around into love and compassion, and for my kids. And I'm very big on emphasizing to my son, like, to let his emotions out, and he's got an explosive emotions, and they're great. And I always think to myself, like, I'm so grateful that I've come to a point where he can express that stuff, and I can be there for him and hold him up and cry with them and laugh with them and joke with them, and it's all authentic, right? And that's what this, like, being able to go through recovery and find myself and do that work has done for me, right? I'm able to pass it on to my children, and it's just such an amazing thing now that we do experience this love and stuff, and it's through doing stuff like this that I've got that, right? And I'm really appreciative of that. So that's it for me.
All three of you have been on a journey of recovery from addiction. And a major part of your journey has been to start feeling again. Tell us about the very beginning, when you started reconnecting with your emotions and your emotional needs.
I think, my first shot at recovery, I didn't know what my emotional needs were. I had no idea what exactly was going to take place. And same thing, I was all full of fear, right? Everything was new, and I didn't have substances. I would stop doing that, so I didn't have that to dictate how I felt. And I was really, like, I couldn't talk with anybody. Every time someone asked me a question, I'd end up crying and just unloading my emotions. And it was all just, it was amazing how much I could release my fear. And then I started kind of channeling that and being able to just talk about it and say, like, this is what's going on for me. But it took me a lot, and I would ask and trying to get people to tell me how I needed to feel. And, to lose that chameleon kind of self in every situation I was in, I would see how the room was and kind of dictate that. That's how I would feel. And for a long time, it was hard. Like, I didn't actually know how to feel. And, and I felt really foreign in a lot of times that, I didn't feel like these people felt, but I felt like I needed to be accepted and brought into the group. And, I really enjoyed the recovery community and what was going on. So I kind of fell into how they were feeling. But I disagreed with a lot of it. And so my feelings again in recovery for a while was, I would figure out what was going on and I would just adapt to that. Cause I honestly thought if I started unloading all my feelings, I'd never stop. I would just cry, and I could never ever amount to anything because I would just be an emotional mess. Because it had been years and years and years of stuff in them, and I had one counselor that really helped me with it, and we would take a couple hours a day instead of doing therapy. I would just cry and just she would let me release my feelings, and it took me a long time to realize like that was okay. Right? And I still think lots, like, my ego was really big for a long time, and I couldn't do it. And in public, like, I would just sit back and be really guarded and stuff. And it took a lot of work and a lot of practice to get to a point where I could actually sit back, think about what my emotions were, and that it was okay to just release that in any environment. And I've been at recovery now for off and on for 20 years, and I'm still just a baby in that aspect, but I'm definitely a work in progress when I'm with that.
Yeah, as you're speaking there, I was remembering, like, for me, the first outward expression of my emotions was in recovery as well. But it made me think back further, and anger was actually accepted by my peers, for sure. Couldn't get angry at home. But if I was playing hockey, man, I'd get angry and hit someone. that was cheered on and everyone loved it. If I wanted to get in a fight, oh, for sure, that's cheered on. So that's what I did. I would drink, and I would, if I got angry or if I felt anything, it would snap to anger. Anger was okay. So it was a bypassing all of these other feelings I had and immediately go to anger. So they're all turned off. I jump over them and go straight into anger, and that was okay. And that I learned that behavior, this jumping, and everything else was just a byproduct of that, and it was buried down. And so it was like, celebrate it. Oh, Brandon, yeah, he can get mad. That's cool. Like, and yeah, I was earlier when we were talking about this before the show, thinking about where my first emotions were. I mean, I had them, but that one was allowed to be expressed. And then fast forward though, moving into recovery, stepping into those doors. Like, I would break down and cry before that, actually. I would sometimes. I'd be using and I would be like, I'm never doing that again. And like anybody, you're laughing, Tony, because anybody who's been in recovery knows that feeling of like, okay, that's it. I'm done. I'm never doing this again. I would get rid of dealers' numbers. I would just like, that's it. And then I'd find myself drinking again and trying to get a hold of that same number, put it back in the phone. And this would repeat for like a year. It was ridiculous. But that process of going through recovery for me, I started to then open up, and I walked in those doors and there were people in there that I didn't know. I was up in Alberta at the time, and I walked through these doors and it was really scary. So scary. And I sat down and I was shaking, and I was like, oh man, this is going to be really hard. And then I listened to other men, like grown men. Like, I was only 27 at the time. And there were people there, men and women, that were in there, all different ages. But they were expressing themselves and saying how they felt. And I was like, oh, okay. And people were listening to every word. They weren't being interrupted. They weren't being told they were wrong. And some people were crying. And then I had a burning desire. I was like, I need to speak. I do. I have emotions. Me right here. I got lots of them. And then it came to me and I started to speak a little bit. I think that first meeting, I probably just said, hi, my name is Brandon. I'm an addict. Sat down. That was like, whew, that was big at that time. But as the weeks, days, months unfolded, I got up every time and I spoke, and I started feeling and expressing and crying, just tears running down my face. I didn't feel any judgment in those rooms. That for me was the most powerful process. I got to be who I was. I was telling them all these horrible things I did, the way that I'm feeling, and they just said, we got you. Whoa, you guys got me? Some of you have been there? Some of you have done worse? Wow. And I was just like, oh, I don't know any of you guys, but wow, I feel good. It was cathartic. I got to just speak and say all these things, and it was magic. Those rooms are magic. Sharing how I felt. I can't express it enough. Like I'm thinking about it now, like it's really hitting me now that was such a gift to have people listen listening is amazing, and the power that it can do to just tell a bit of your story. Because man, I was hurting. I was in rough shape internally, especially stuffing down those emotions for 27 years, right? Just everything stuffed in, and then the compounding of the anger and the rage and the fear and the resentment, and just, and it just bubbles up, right? Like, and to your point, Tony, like I would just start bawling and be like, oh my God, there's more. Like, it won't end. But each time I did that, I did feel a little bit better, a little bit lighter. I was like, okay, oh God, that feels good, right? Sharing and expressing. So that was the beginning of my journey of expressing how I felt. But it was by no means easy. I don't want to let it out and let the viewers think like, oh yeah, that's easy for you because you love sharing. You're doing a podcast, like it's in your nature. It's not. I was pretty quiet up until that point. Like maybe externally with my friends, I was loud when I was drinking, but yeah, I shut everything down at that point. I was depressed. I was an inward person. And so to do that, it took courage, and it was really hard. So I just want to make sure that I touch on that point, that I'm not different than anybody else. I had a lot to say, but it was scary. It is scary. If you're going into those rooms for the first time, or you have something you want to tell somebody because it's eating you up inside, yeah, it's scary. And yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do it. It's scary right? You can do it. So that was the beginning of my journey of expressing my feelings. Do you have something to share, Kirby?
Thank you. What comes through for me is like I had lots of feelings that I feel that I felt as a young person, but I didn't express. I was really blocked from expressing, and then I stopped feeling for a while. But my path has been, similar to both of yours, but also totally different. And the moment that I realized that I had no idea who I was, I had no idea who Kirby Freeman is and or was, it was really scary, but it was also really opening for me, because in that not knowing, I all of a sudden had this opportunity to discover who I am with curiosity. It's like, do I like fishing? I actually like fishing. Let's do that more, right? Or do I like dancing? It's like, I love dancing. Let's do that more, right? So it's like the curiosity lightened my vibration into being authentic, right? And inauthenticity was very prevalent in my upbringing in childhood, because I had to mask to have my needs met to keep myself safe. And through discovering who I was, it's like, I'm safe already. I'm alive. I'm here. And I will be tomorrow. And I just need to show up and express myself as fully and completely as I can in the moment, as long as it's honoring of me and the people around me. And a beautiful synergy happened when I started to do that. And it was just the alignment of my purpose and my path unfolded. I didn't have to force it. I didn't have to make it work. It's just like trusting that it will come, and saying yes to what is aligned for me created the path for me to deepen into my work, my inner work. And safety has been a big one for me. It's like, am I safe to share? Am I safe to express this? And it depends on the company for me. Still to this day, it's like, how deep can I go? Do they have capacity to hold me? If they don't, do I have capacity to hold myself? right? So it's not interesting. It's complicated and nonlinear and challenging, yet peaceful at the same time. Another paradox. Life is full of them. It's wild, right? Yeah, I feel complete with that share. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just coming up for me is this, watching my emotions and making sure I wasn't using them as a manipulation tactic, because that's what I was used to, right? And, I could be really emotional and close to somebody if I needed something from them, and that's how I got a lot of things growing up and all through my life. So I got to watch that in recovery too and make sure I was, and like I said, I didn't know who I was either, so to be authentic, I had no clue what that looked like, right? So every time I would come up against something and I would make sure that I wasn't manipulating a situation or trying to get something out of it, and that it was actually the way I felt. It took a long time. And that safety thing, because of, I couldn't tell anybody anything growing up kind of thing, I never did. And in recovery, that was hard. I had to find, and they said it's okay to share, it's okay to be who you want to be, and, and so I had a really hard time finding myself, and I was really guarded. And in the beginning, I would just tell people what they wanted to hear and, fabricate stuff and, all that just to fit in for a long time. And even with the counseling, like I'd been in different counseling all through my life and different therapy sessions and all this stuff. And I don't think once I was ever my authentic self, because I didn't know who it was. I didn't have no clue who that was. And I didn't know who I wanted to be. It was really daunting for me to come up with that and to try and be authentic. And then, getting into recovery and talking with other men was a really tough thing for me too. Because, I lost my dad when I was young. I was always with my mom. I felt calm around women, and they felt safe around me because I was kind of a, tough guy and go and protect women kind of thing. And growing up, and I'd always have, that kind of persona. And so to tell other men that was tough. I didn't want to tell other men nothing because I didn't want to show my vulnerability for one, and I had to get rid of my ego for another thing, and that's all I had, right, was, and so that was really tough. And then, I would go to these men's groups, and I started joining these groups that were just men just because of that, so I could learn how to do that. And I found a few that were just amazing. There was some, that I didn't feel very safe at, so I wouldn't, dig very deep, but I did find a few through the years that really helped me out, and a lot of parenting groups, dad's groups, stuff like that. And I would try everything and just see where I fit in and how that worked. And, I was grieving for a lot of years, the loss of a lot of things. And that came out a lot for me. Every group I would be in, like that grief process that I didn't understand or how to feel, because, I experienced lots of death and loss growing up, and constantly I never, ever felt it. Like I remember when I was a kid going to my dad's funeral and not even crying or feeling anything, and just kind of taking it all in. And through a lot of years, I lost a lot of people, and I never ever felt one loss. And I was really worried about that, because I knew there had to be something inside me that was broken because of these losses, and I never could express that. And I was worried that it wasn't in it. I looked into being like narcissistic and like all these different things that I might be, because I didn't have those feelings. And, I knew there was something in there. I just didn't know how to get there or how to express it. And, there's a few people in my life that I've recently come to know. And like, I'm a faith believer. So that was one, right? I started believing in God and I'm a Christian. So going to church and stuff. And that was a place I could really find that being able to express myself, and that, I don't find that, through other people now. I'm heavily in prayer and, spiritual understanding of my expression now. And my emotions through that have been just amazing. I'm able to express all my feelings now, and I do it openly, and I'm not guarded. It's been an amazing thing for me to get into, being able to find grief and go through that process. Because in addiction, as we all know, you lose a lot of people, right? And being able to feel that and actually go through that process has been very freeing for me. Because if I didn't, I don't know how to survive, because I lose so many people. And that was a tough one, not knowing how to even feel, right? And waiting for somebody to tell me, but then when they would tell me, I wouldn't agree. It was tough to be authentic when you had no idea who I was, and a lot of shame and stuff like that. So I couldn't fully express myself, and a lot of stuff that I was worried about repercussions for. So that was a big thing. So I was like really pick and choose what I'd share. And I think I ripped myself off for a lot of years by not opening up fully to that recovery process, and that, other men sharing. And then, like what Brandon said about like the commonality, I finally found a room that other people were doing the same thing and sharing and crying and laughing and, getting along with each other. And it was just amazing to me that was a thing, because I've never experienced it before. Felt like I was on another planet almost. It was crazy.
I've got something else that came up for me in that share, Tony. Thank you for going there. And I love how you weaved in faith and your higher power. Before the shoot started today, we were talking about higher power, and you brought up a really beautiful point and perspective that I hadn't noticed in me before. And that was my addiction was my higher power. I was giving it money. I was giving it all of my attention. I was praying for it, to it, really fully opening in that way to it. And it really was not serving me, right? And I'm saying all this to illustrate the power that we have to choose our higher power in a good way, in a way that's going to actually align our soul with what we're here to do, right? So yeah, I felt called to share the realization that I had through your sharing this morning, and the impact of, even if we don't feel we believe in higher power, look at our actions. Where are we giving our time and energy in a patterned way, right? Whether or not we're conscious over where our higher power is for each individual to find out. But I now choose a path of aligning with myself and my higher power, because I feel it's really necessary for me and people I surround myself with to have that, and to pay attention to it and speak to it and live in a ceremonial way. Yeah, that's what I have on that.
Yeah, thanks guys for sharing. I want to touch on a little piece there too about that higher power piece, especially for people that are, walking in and out of the rooms. For me, that was really off-putting for me. The God thing for me at that time was something that was, me and my friends were not into, and it was very scary. And so coming into the room saying like, oh, you need to like pray to God and you need to have this. And I was like, that piece ain't for me. And so I think it's important what you've touched on, Kirby, is what that higher power means for you, because it does mean something different to everyone. There's like over 5,000 religions out there, right? It's a lot of gods, it's a lot of gods. And so whatever that is for you, you feel that inside your heart, and it is something that you can keep within you. Like, that's yours. That's your spirituality. It doesn't have to fit into anybody else's box. And I think that's really critical for people, so that they don't get scared away from somebody else's ideology of what spirituality means, because it is individual. And I know each one of us have our own individual spirituality, and it's, for me, it completely changed my life. Yeah. Just wanted to note that.